All right, what's up, herd watchers? I wasn't really going to do this video right now, but I got to go drive somewhere and do something. It's going to take me about 10 minutes to get there, so we might as well chat. I already did a personal vlog. If you haven't seen that, go take a look at Modern Samurai TV on Facebook or The Modern Samurai. You can find me on YouTube, etc., etc., etc. Anyway, enough of that personal stuff. Let's talk about the Supreme Court nomination of Neil Gorsuch. So, I've been watching this for a couple of days now, and it is interesting to see the stark contrast between the man. I mean, as we've seen so much recently, the connection between real events and what CNN is going to give you in a headline, what the Huffington Post is going to say, what Vox is going to say, what BuzzFeed and those people are going to try and feed you is stark. And it's only growing worse as they grow more and more sort of panic-ridden. And they're gaining power within their sphere of influence. They really can simply create news and events out of whole cloth for the left. For the portion of the country that pays attention to them. But as the influence of that portion of the country shrinks, and in many ways is at an all-time low, they're rapid, to keep what little bit of influence and power they have, they're constantly ratcheting up the panic and stupidity within their failing sphere of influence. And their ability to sort of generate this red scare out of nothing is one example of that. It's a case where, thanks to the democratic process, they do hold some power still, and it's enough power to be dangerous and disruptive. And the Gorsuch hearings are another such example. Make no mistake, Neil Gorsuch is probably the most qualified Supreme Court candidate we've had in recent history. I'm a Scalia fan, but if I had to put them against each other, I'd go Gorsuch over Scalia pretty much any day. This is a guy who is, as I said in my post, he's unfailingly polite. He's unfailingly thoughtful. He's fair-minded. He's been taking just an incredible amount of vile insults from some of the most ridiculous people in our government. Dianne Feinstein and sort of, just pick any of them. Al Franken, for God's sake. It's astonishing that man ever won office, but whatever. So, and here's a guy who, in the face of all of this, keeps repeating the guiding moral principles of his beliefs, which is this: as a judge, it is his job to apply the law, not make the law. It is his job to enforce the laws that the people of the United States have created, and not to rewrite those laws when they see fit. And that, more than anything, is what sticks in the craw of the left, because they have never had any respect for the concept of self-governance, or in a very real way, the far left has never had any respect for democracy or the democratic process. They have a classic elitist top-down view where there's a small group of them that are smart enough to know what they should jam down the throat of everyone else, and that if you don't like it, then they should have the power to force it on you, which is why they're so drawn to collectivism and socialism and communism. They talk about that as being for the people and of the people, but communism and socialism are never that way. It's always an elite forcing their opinions and thoughts down the throats of the many. Now, one could argue that capitalism has a lot to do with, or democracy has a lot to do with a small number of people than everyone making the decisions. But the point of view of a capitalist democratic government is that thanks to the market, you have the ability to fight back. Whereas it's in the nature of an authoritarian socialist to force you to buy healthcare or force you to, attend the school they want you to attend. It is in the nature of capitalist, libertarian governments to be expansive and to, let you go buy whatever healthcare you want or none. The problem, of course, is that with freedom comes the possibility of failure, and that's the stick by which the left beats you into accepting their authority. That if you can buy any healthcare you want or no healthcare, then some people might not have healthcare. And as a result, in order to provide healthcare for everyone, you are going to cede to the government complete control over your healthcare choice. Anyway, getting off track on that a little bit. But so here's Gorsuch, who at every turn, he's an originalist. He is about the idea that, most importantly, he's about the idea that the government is the ultimate Goliath to the David of the individual common man. And this runs through everything he says. When he's talking about the value of the plain text of the letter of the law, when he's talking about the way he has occasionally put the brakes on the government's and the justice system's machinations in favor of a defendant who may or may not be particularly sympathetic, when an idiot like Feinstein goes ahead and, cherry picks her facts and tries to just sort of play gotcha with it. But it is amazing to hear someone who will wield so much power, and is so heartening to hear someone who will have such authority recognize that in the face of the government, that the individual is essentially powerless unless the judiciary protects him. Without the judiciary protecting the small guy, without the judiciary looking at a search warrant and saying, no, you weren't supposed to have that search, even though you might have found evidence, without the judiciary saying, the plain text letter of the law matters, then even though on occasion the bully might do the right thing and get the right way, that there's no check on the power of the bully. And the government has the potential to be the largest force for violence and bullying that a democratic citizen, a citizen in democratic society will ever come across. That nothing matches the power of the federal government to control you. The federal government has a monopoly on the legal ability to take away your constitutional rights. It has monopoly on the ability to take away your freedom, to take away your access to your own property, to your relatives, to your friends, to your things. That power, once the government took upon itself the power to confiscate your property and take away your liberty by locking you up, and to use force if you refuse, we created our own biggest fear and the largest threat to democracy that a democracy will ever see is its own government. And in that way, it is incumbent upon the judiciary to use the strict letter of the contract that we signed with the government, where we gave it that power, which was the Constitution, and that he has to stand on that contract, that it can't simply be the whim of him as a government agent to impose his will in absence of the democratic process, because that way lies the end of a meaningful democracy. For better or for worse, for good reasons or bad, when a federal judge, who is the person who is invested with the power to wield violence on behalf of the state, when that man, your last check and balance, says, I am going to rule in a specific way because I feel that that is the right answer, as opposed to, I'm going to rule in a particular way because that's the way the rules were set up by you, by the people, by the democratic people, that's the door to fascism. That's one of the openings that you get there. That's how you get a citizenry who never has any idea what the laws are, because we never know what the Supreme Court is going to rule, because whatever, who knows what their feelings are this day. If you're particularly sympathetic, or you're a minority, or you have a sob story, or you happen to fit their politics, they're going to rule in your favor because that's what their feelings tell them to do. And it's useful that the judiciary might have empathy, and it is useful that the judiciary has a sense of fairness, but that cannot be at the expense of adherence to the law. And the one thing that I like about Gorsuch is that I think he really believes that. Now, Leslie asked in the comments, and I couldn't read everything you said about Feinstein because I'm driving and I can't read all of it, but I'll answer the top part. Why Gorsuch over Scalia? Maybe not a young Scalia at the beginning of his career, but I feel that towards the end, that Scalia really started to feel the weight of his decades in and among interpretationalists, and particularly some of his later rulings, I feel, were far away from his strictly constitutionalist roots, and that towards the end, I think he began really feeling a desire to leave a constructionalist legacy, and I think he felt I think he changed his mind and became much more into creating law where there was none. I'm particularly not thrilled with a couple of the larger decisions at the end of his life. And I think looking through his history, though Scalia was a fantastic judge for much of his career, I really feel like towards the end that he lost his way. And that's the Scalia that I'm thinking of when I look at him versus Gorsuch. When we weigh their entire careers against each other in a couple of decades, I'll be able to tell you who I think in the end was the better jurist. But right now, the young-ish, sort of still sticking to his principles, not yet bowed to sort of the pressure of his fellow SCOTUS judges, I just feel that Gorsuch is right now, pound for pound, the judge I have the most faith in recent memory with the legal system. I love his decisions in every case I've read of his, even the ones where people are trying to make him out to be some sort of monster. And there is not one shred of rational backing to these accusations. I mean, what was the idiocy that somebody said? If you drink water or breathe air, you should be afraid of Neil Gorsuch. What hyperbolic bullshit that is. I mean, you would think this guy goes out in his backyard every night with a pile of puppies and a pitchfork to, throw at his minority neighbors, hoping they get dysentery so that he can see them die in pain. Like, just the most ridiculous possible, most panic and fear-ridden interpretations of a completely reasonable set of decisions by probably one of the most even-tempered men to go for a SCOTUS nomination in recent times. And I get they're pissed about Garland and whatever. They can be pissed about it all they want. The reality is that there was nothing untoward or sketchy about what happened to Garland. But even if they wanted to scream from the rooftops about the Garland nomination not coming through, none of that justifies the vilification, the willful stupidity, and the fear-mongering and panic that's just rolling off their tongues. But again, this is the left. In the last year or more, they've really had nothing but panic and screaming to make their case. They really went over the edge when Trump got elected. They have no idea why or how it happened. CNN is getting more and more insane by the day. And if you watch those hearings and then you go read the CNN headlines, it will be staggering how far they diverge from reality. And I will not put it past CNN to have a headline tonight that goes, Neil Gorsuch admits to murdering his grandmother, and he says, and I quote, "I'll do it again," or "I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for that meddling Feinstein," or whatever stupidity they're going to ascribe to him. But if you listen to the man, listen to his words, listen to his answers to the questions, I am incredibly heartened by his calm and equanimity in the face of such gratuitous stupidity and grandstanding. And he is a man of humor and grace. I am completely confident in his legal reasoning, and everything I've read about his cases and the basis by which he makes his judgment leads me to believe that I'm going to be happy with his rulings on the issues I care about. I think it will be nice to have another judge on the bench who believes in the Constitution that formed the nation. It will be nice to have another judge on the bench who believes that the judiciary has a responsibility to stand as a bulwark between the power of government and the relative helplessness of the common man. He has greater faith in commoners than I do. He has great faith in the concept of jury trials in a way I simply don't. I don't know. The guy is just really good. And I get the frustration of the Democrats. They don't have the power to stop this. He's going to be confirmed. He's going to get on the bench, and all their ridiculous grandstanding isn't going to change any of it, and all their silliness in the FBI hearings is not going to bear any fruit, let alone any fruit fast enough to prevent this appointment from happening. And the last thing in the world that the left wants is someone on the bench who is more interested in the law and the Constitution than he is his feelings. Because when a judge rules on the law, and he rules on the written law, then he is not subject to how many people are outside in the street boycotting and waving signs. He's not subject to whatever Huffington Post headline happens to come out. He's not subject to the endless parade of screaming, wailing paid protesters and victims that they would drag through the courtroom and put on CNN. And because the left right now doesn't have an argument founded in logic, they have an argument founded purely on emotion. It's purely, oh my God, you're going to let the children starve in the streets. And that's the only justification they have for that, is sympathy over reality, is, the need of some over the rights of others is their only lever, and it's their only argument. And the last thing in their world that will work on is a judge who has the intention of ruling based on law. And you saw it with the discussion of Al Franken and his pet hobby horse about arbitration as opposed to jurists, jury trials for those things where people enter into those contracts. And here's a guy who he's just deeply frustrated by the fact that he has a point of view and he can't seem to manage to get a law changed. And so he wants to manipulate and nullify the law that is on the books, the stated intention of the legislature, and by extension, the stated intention of the citizenry of the United States. And Al Franken doesn't like it, and he wants a judge who will, at a stroke, nullify it. And he wants that because if it's one man who can nullify it with the stroke of a pen, then that man is open to influence, he's open to leverage, he's open to power, he's open to being bribed and manipulated and threatened. And when you have a judge who's willing to make judgments based on their own emotions and do not feel bound by the law, then you only have to manipulate that one guy. It's a single point of failure. All you have to do is get to his feelings, and you can what? Destroy the will of the nation? Because right now, arbitration over the absolute right to a jury trial for civil situations, that's the law, because that's what we, as the citizens of a democratically constituted nation, through our democratically elected representatives, that is our will. That is the way we constructed that law. If you do not agree with it, then change the law. And if you do not have the power to change the law, then you do not speak for the people of this nation. And I find it insulting in the extreme that because he doesn't like it, and even though he can't get it changed through real channels, because let's be clear, this is not a constitutional issue. He's shopping the judiciary to get them to nullify it. He wants them to nullify a law because he doesn't like it. And that's, in a nutshell, the exact problem that the left has with Gorsuch. That exchange about that thing, that series of exchanges between Al Franken and Gorsuch's responses are exactly why I want him on the bench, and exactly why Franken can't stand the idea of him being on the bench. So, anyway, for those of you watching, the one or two of you, depending on however many there are, hopefully that answered a little bit of it. And I don't think I can... Oh, wait, I can scroll back and see. Franken's question was far less. What's the biggest trout you ever... No, see, I don't think that was more ridiculous than a question like, what's the biggest trout you ever had? I loved... now that Ted Cruz has no danger of being my president, and seems to have figured out that he has to come to heel if he wants a scrap from the table, I thought Ted Cruz's question about life, the universe, and everything was hilarious. The joke questions are necessary to break the. I think they're necessary to break the tension, and actually watching the hearings and watching the back and forth between some of the members of the committee was really heartening for me, because it's nice that even in the middle of that most contentious event, they can still find a way to joke together, which I thought was nice. And I think most of the people grandstanding against Garland, I think it's clear that they're fond of him personally, and that they are in fact grandstanding, with the exception of Feinstein, who I haven't really heard have a warm note in her voice since, I don't know, the Ice Age, or the last time she had something fun happen to her. But with any luck, she'll ride off into the sunset soon enough and lose her place, get voted out or whatever, as soon as humanly possible. Anyway, I hope you guys had a good time. I hope this was somewhat informative to you, maybe sparked discussion. Feel free to chat in the comments, and obviously like and follow Riding Herd as well. If you had been following there over the last couple of days, you would be already know my opinions on a lot of this, because that's sort of where I do my real-time thinking of these things before and in between these video presentations. Take it easy, everybody. Leslie, I hope I answered your question at least somewhat. Thanks, everybody.